What defines a terrific protagonist in a video game? Is it their relatability, their personality, likability value, or is it something else? Welcome to the video. You're listening to Phil of Philby Gaming, and the plan for today is to take a look at 3 male protagonists from 3 separate franchises, comparing each one against the other to see if we can figure out who the greatest gaming hero is. This video is strictly speculation, and of course you may not agree with the thoughts or choices shared here, so if you feel that another character entirely should have made the comparison, let us know down in the comment section and I'll happily put another video together. Also, if you wish to see a female gaming hero comparison, by all means add their names too, and I can begin work on that as well. On a quick side note, there will be spoilers ahead for each of the 3 games, so please be aware of this. But to be fair, all the protagonists are from video games that were released several years ago, so we should be okay. I won't be comparing things such as gameplay or story, although elements of these will be spoken about, as this is more of a character comparison than the 3 titles themselves. If you guys enjoy the following, make sure to hit like, and if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. Also, you can find me over on the channel's Instagram page, where you'll find information on upcoming projects, should you wish to do so. That's at Philby Gaming. Apologies for the long intro, but I had to get a few things out there before we began. And now with that being said, it's time to get into today's video. Before we can start this video off, let's introduce the 3 protagonists we'll be comparing against each other today. Firstly, from Days Gone, we have Deacon St. Secondly, Arthur Morgan of Rockstar Games' Red Dead Redemption 2, and finally, we have Joel Miller from The Last of Us. Deacon St. John was born in the early 1980s and grew up in Farewell, Oregon. He lost his mother at an early age to unknown causes and became a somewhat rebellious teen as the years passed, potentially due to this. Knowing he had to do something with his life, Deacon would enlist in the United States Army, where he was stationed in the 10th Mountain Division and served a full tour of duty in Afghanistan. During a mission while advancing on Mazar-i-Sharif, a city in Afghanistan, St. John's squad was ambushed by a Taliban group on flatbed trucks equipped with Zu-23 modified anti-aircraft guns. During the attack, their Humvee was destroyed as it fell off a cliff into the Hari River. Deacon survived both the attack and the crash and swam to the wreckage in hopes of finding any survivors. He managed to pull 8 squad members back to shore, including a sergeant. This event traumatized Deacon, and after completing his tour, he decided not to re-enlist. After returning home, Deacon would purchase a motorcycle and spend the next few years drifting, before deciding to return home to Farewell. Gaining employment as a mechanic in a motorcycle store, Deacon would become close friends with the owner and president of the Mongrels Motorcycle Club, Jack, and his sergeant-at-arms, Boozer. This eventually led to Deacon being patched in as an enforcer for the MC. At some point in the following years, Deacon would meet a young botanist named Sarah Whitaker. The pair quickly fell in love with one another and would marry, much to the dismay of her family due to Deacon's outlaw lifestyle. Because of this decision, St. John would become a nomad from the MC, meaning he would be less involved with their activities in order to spend more time with Sarah. Following this, albeit some time later, an unknown virus would outbreak, turning the local populace into ravenous, cannibalistic monsters, thus beginning the story of Days Gone. Arthur Morgan was born in 1863 to Beatrice and Lyle Morgan, somewhere in the northern United States. Just like Deacon St. John, he too lost his mother at an early age, also from unknown causes. His father, a petty criminal, was arrested for larceny when Arthur was just 11 and put to death for his crimes. Although himself and Arthur had a strained relationship, Arthur retained his father's gambler's hat as an ode to the man. At just 14 years of age, Arthur was living rough as a street urchin, undertaking petty crimes just to survive. It was around this time that he was discovered by 2 gentlemen. the charismatic Dutch van der Linde, and his right-hand man, Hosea Matthews. Both men saw potential in this wild delinquent and took him under their wing, with the trio founding the Van der Linde Boys. Arthur was taught to both read and write by his surrogate fathers, as well as being able to hunt, shoot, and defend himself. Later, in 1885, the trio was joined by a young John Marston, whom Dutch and Hosea raised the same way they did Arthur. Both boys were instilled with Dutch's anarchist worldviews against a corrupted government. Sometime during his teens to early 20s, Arthur would meet a young lady whom would fall pregnant to him. He would have a son named Isaac. Although he would visit them from time to time, the Van der Linde gang was what he felt he owed his loyalty to. In a robbery gone wrong, Arthur's former lover and his son would fall victim to murder, all for just $10. Discovering this tragedy would harden Arthur, forming a coldness within himself. He would later court a young Mary Gillis, whom he fell deeply in love with. Unfortunately, once again, the gang would come first, and aided by the disapproving feelings of her family towards Arthur, the relationship was destined for failure. The Van der Linde gang would perform robberies on local banks and such, often giving some of the profits to those less fortunate than themselves, although this wouldn't last forever. In time, the gang would become larger and larger, taking on members from all walks of life, all the while continuing to perform heists. This would eventually lead to the infamous Blackwater Ferry heist and the start of Red Dead Redemption 2. Joel Miller was born in Arlington, Texas in 1981, growing up alongside his younger brother Tommy. As a child, he developed a love for music, specifically his guitar, and aspired to become a musician as he grew older. Even though himself and Tommy were as close as brothers could be, Joel would often assert dominance as the older sibling, something which Tommy would remember in the years to come. When he was young, sometime in his late teens, Joel would both meet and fall in love with an unnamed young lady, and the pair would fall pregnant, giving Joel a baby daughter who he named Sarah. Having a daughter at such a young age halted Joel's plans to attend both college or university. He did marry Sarah's mother, although the marriage was short-lived. The details of what happened in their relationship are scarce, but whatever it was, it pained Joel deeply. Shortly after Sarah was born, Joel's wife left both him and his daughter, leaving Joel to raise Sarah alone. Although he always aspired to become a singer, those dreams had to be put on hold for the time being, as he would put Sarah's needs first. Joel studied carpentry, and by the time he was in his early 30s, he worked for a contractor alongside his younger brother Tommy, although he hoped to run his own business one day. Although his work kept him busy, he always made time to spend with his daughter. He would often take her to her soccer games, carnivals, and even managed a cruise at one point. Sarah would also drag him along to every museum in Texas, and the pair would often hike together too. Joel was a very loving father who truly cherished his daughter. Life seemed perfect for the pair. That was until September 27th of 2013, mere hours after Joel's 32nd birthday. This is when things would take a turn truly for the worst, thus beginning the story of The Last of Us. All three of the protagonists suffered some form of hardship early on in their life, whether it be Deacon during the Taliban ambush in Afghanistan, Arthur losing Isaac and his mother to bandits, or Joel's divorce and being forced to raise Sarah on his own at such a young age. Although each tragedy was unique to the character, the pain each went through was similar. They all lost someone, which was a burden that would carry on with them for the remainder of their days. Many real-world people could certainly relate to these tragic stories of the three. Soldiers serving in any military have experienced war and even death. People who unfortunately have had to bury their children, whatever the circumstance, and young parents have often been abandoned by their spouses, resulting in them raising their children on their own. The personality of each character in the events prior to their respective games are somewhat similar to one another. Each are strong-willed and determined, all showing a passion for what they believe in, whether it be the army, the gang life, or fatherhood. Each have a loyalty to those around them. Compassion towards others is a big part of their existence, with a slight exception for Arthur Morgan, whom kills and robs but still has a strong love for his close family. The resilience in each man is strong, as shown in how they continued on after their respective losses. Each character steps up for what they believe in, taking care of what they need to, and holding on to what they can to stay strong. Deacon had the MC, Arthur had the Van der Linde gang, and Joel had his daughter. The following will contain, as warned at the start of the video, heavy spoilers for each of the games, so please be aware. Let's begin with the events of Days Gone and our time as Deacon St. John. The game starts off with an impactful scene. The Freaker virus outbreak has turned up seemingly overnight, turning the majority of the populace into cannibalistic monsters under some form of mind control. Sarah, Deacon's wife, has been stabbed by one of the smaller infected, known as newts. Deacon and best friend Boozer battle their way through the streets, attempting to find an escape. Even though they find the Nero chopper, part of an emergency response, there's only room for two of them. Boozer is badly wounded, and even though Deacon loves his wife, he can't leave his best friend behind for the Freakers. He learns where the chopper is taking Sarah and watches her fly away. Fast forward 2 years, and Deacon and Boozer are doing what they can to survive out in this broken world. Taking on bounties, collecting freakeries, which are a form of currency, and helping out establish survivor camps in exchange for supplies. We quickly learn that the Nero camp that Sarah was headed to was overrun by infected. There were no survivors. Deacon struggles to accept this, even after time has passed. 2 years into the outbreak, there is no civilization. The world is run by the Freakers. Deacon and Boozer agree that they are sick of living in the shit, as they put it, and have plans to head north in search of a better existence. Right before this, the duo are attacked by a cultist gang who worship the infected, called the Rippers. Boozer's arm is burnt to a crisp by a blowtorch and needs immediate medical attention. This halts their plans. Deacon refuses to leave Boozer's side. He's all he has left in this world. The two are brothers who have survived this far by sticking together. We'll discuss more of how his character changed over time, along with some important moments that altered this. We'll also be doing this with Arthur and Joel later in the video. We begin our tale as Arthur Morgan, as himself and the rest of the Van der Linde's gang are fleeing over the northern snowy mountains, following a failed robbery attempt. This was known as the Blackwater Ferry heist, in what seemed to be an ambush by the law, as if they knew beforehand of the events. A couple of the gang members didn't make it, such as both the Calendar Boys and young Jenny Kirk. These are the opening scenes to Red Dead Redemption 2. After finding their way off the mountain, the gang make it back to civilization. During the earlier portion of the story, Arthur is tasked with retrieving a debt collection from one Thomas Towns, a sickly man who owes the gang money. This would be his undoing. Throughout the story, the Van der Linde gang are forced to relocate their camp, primarily due to the actions of the gang themselves. Along with this, Arthur is introduced to an array of characters, often offering him choices whether to be the good guy or the bad guy. These actions shape Arthur's personality. As he continues to stay loyal to Dutch, the gang's leader, by partaking in criminal activities for the profit of the gang, he begins to develop an illness over time from which he contracted from Thomas Towns, tuberculosis. After this diagnosis, Arthur, albeit depending on the player, becomes a better person, helping others in the world, such as Charlotte Balfour or Sister Calderon, as we watch the gang he loves so much fall apart around him. Joel's primary tragic event happens right at the beginning of the game. A cordyceps fungi has ravaged over the world, taking control of civilians, turning them into feral beings, much similar to Days Gone. Joel and his daughter Sarah are thrown right into the mix, with the father having to put down one of his neighbours in order to protect his daughter. His brother Tommy arrives to rescue the two from the scene, and the three attempt to flee the city to safety. Unfortunately, everyone in Austin, Texas had the same idea, and the three struggle to get through traffic. They are soon caught up in a car accident, leading to Sarah breaking her leg. As they attempt to flee through the chaotic streets, with Sarah in Joel's arms, they come across a soldier. The soldier, although clearly reluctant to do so, is under orders to kill anyone fleeing the area, as to contain the spread of the outbreak. This moment is a breaking point for Joel's psyche. He becomes cold-hearted and seems to feel little remorse for the people around him. The timeline fast-forwards 20 years, with players now experiencing a much older Joel in a world destroyed by the infection. Quarantine zones have been set up in an attempt to keep what's left of civilization safe. Joel works as a smuggler, transporting goods behind the backs of the federal government, whom are in charge of these zones. It's during this time that the leader of the anti-government Firefly militia, Marlene, needs something different smuggled out of the city. A young girl called Ellie, who's been infected by the cordyceps virus but has proven to be immune. She's the only person in the world like this. As each protagonist goes through their journey, from pre-game to post-game, their character alters. Firstly, let's take a look at Deacon St. John. The story of Days Gone is told through a series of flashbacks, and although we don't get to witness his time in the military, or even during his days with the Mongrels MC, we do get quite a lot of scenes with his wife, Sarah, from when they first meet to their time together and their wedding day. Pre-outbreak, Deacon was a very caring person towards Sarah, often being quite romantic and a joker. During their first encounter, when they are hassled by some thugs, Sarah uses a pistol to scare them away. Later, during the first days of the outbreak, Deacon is forced to kill another survivor to protect himself. Both situations terrified Deacon, showing that he didn't have many violent tendencies within him. But by the time we step into his shoes, 2 years into the pandemic, Deacon is somewhat cold-hearted and has no remorse when it comes to killing. He often talks to himself when out on the road, mumbling obscenities after an interaction of some kind, whether it be discovering a freak nest, ambush point, or even after a kill. He does still have a sensitive side to him, although it's buried much deeper than he realises. At one point, he meets a young girl named Lisa. Lisa is an early teen who was at school during the initial outbreak. After being rushed home, her parents had already been escorted to a nearby quarantine zone. Fearing to leave her home, she survived the next 2 years by herself. Deacon, upon finding her, is immediately concerned for the poor girl, as she's obviously traumatised. He takes her to a neighbouring survivor camp, where he pleads with the camp owner to take it easy on her. Later, when Lisa is taken by the Rippers, the cultist group of the game, Deacon comes to her rescue, feeling that it's his duty to look after the girl. He also displays love for his brother-in-arms, Boozer, showing compassion by bringing him a puppy dog to cheer him up after he falls into a bout of depression following the amputation of his arm. Deacon's determination is an admirable trait. Even after his wife is believed to be dead, he continues on a search for her, despite others telling him it's a waste of time and he needs to move on. This is relatable for players, as they may feel the same way if they hadn't actually seen a corpse. He shows strong resilience at points in the game. For example, when he is kidnapped by the Rippers, he is tortured with a blowtorch for information on Boozer's whereabouts, but refuses to give him up. A true brother. His tragic event is somewhat different from Arthur Morgan's or Joel Miller's. where he felt that he lost his wife and spent the next 2 years mourning her. She turned up safe and sound, working at a military camp, although it seemed little more than a prison. So after rescuing her, it was a somewhat happy ending for Deacon St. John, even if the world was still at an end. The characterization of Arthur Morgan may be a little tricky, as the player dictates his actions, but for the sake of the video, I'll go along with what I believe most players do, and play as an honourable character. When players first step into his boots, he's portrayed to have a strong persona. Although he clearly had a loyalty to the Vantolin gang, he has no issues with calling out the actions of the group that he doesn't like or agree with. We see this many times with Micah Bell. Arthur is a top gunman for Dutch and is often brought in to intimidate when necessary. We learn early that he's very protective of his family, in particular the girls. When visiting the town of Valentine with a few of the girls, there are a couple of instances where he must protect them, such as when Anthony Foreman grabs hold of Tilly and when an unknown male begins to beat on Karen. Arthur's there in a heartbeat. Even when someone recognises him from Blackwater, he chases the man down to protect his family. He often shows compassion to others in the gang. We see this during talks with Mary Beth Gaskill, in which he discusses his recent actions and feels remorse for them, or when he spends time with young Jack. When collecting debts for the gang, Arthur shows a more darker side of himself. He has no hesitation to turn each encounter into violence if the debtor refuses to pay. This included the very sickly Thomas Downs, which of course would be a primary point in Arthur's life. We see this more often during collections, such as when Gwyn Hughes digs up a grave to pay his debt. Most people would have told him to go and find another way to pay, but instead Arthur just guards the gate. At times like these, he shows a real lack of compassion. He seems blinded by his loyalty to Dutch van der Linde and the rest of his family. As time progresses, Arthur begins to develop a cough, which becomes increasingly more violent. In the later stages of the game, he passes out in the city of Saint-Denis from this. A kind stranger helps him to the doctor's office and even gives him money for his medical bill if needed. This is where his life changes forever. He's diagnosed with a deadly disease, tuberculosis. From here on out, Arthur begins to see things differently. He loses the violent edge he had, to a degree at least, and begins to help those he can. We see this when visiting Brother Dawkins and Sister Calderon, the latter of whom becomes a guide of some sort to Arthur. He sees the declining mental state of Dutch more than others, who at the time are still blinded by the same loyalty that Arthur once had. Even though he still acts as a debt collector for the gang, he often allows the debtors to walk free, now understanding how disgusting some of his actions previously were. Before his death in 1899, he is able to make amends with the Downs family. Edith Downs, the wife of the now deceased debtor, Thomas, has unfortunately been forced to work the streets to get by, and her son Archie is working in the mines in Ansberg, being bullied because of his mother's line of work. Arthur saves them both from harm and gives them whatever money he can to survive. He becomes a much-loved character because of actions like these, and his passing was felt heavily by players. After the death of his daughter, Joel Miller becomes a shell of his former self. Even as the game picks up 20 years later, he acts cold-hearted towards those around him. His partner Tess is the only person close to Joel, but even with her, he's still a little stone-hearted. Shortly into the story of The Last of Us, Joel and Tess are tasked with escorting a young girl out of the city. This young teen, Ellie, reminds Joel of the daughter he lost years before, and he's immediately reluctant to form any bonds with her. We quickly learn that Ellie is infected and immune to the cordyceps virus, and after the death of Tess, it's now just the two of them. As the duo cross the United States in search of the Fireflies, who claim to have scientists working on a cure, Joel is icy towards Ellie. Although he does what he can to protect her, it's unclear whether this is because she's immune and he could save the world, or because he's forming a connection. Later on, after the pair have been through their ups and downs, Ellie sees Joel as a father figure. Joel notices this, and when they reunite with his brother Tommy, he wants to pass her off onto him, still because of fear of losing another child. This hurts Ellie deeply, and she goes missing. When Joel finds her, the player is introduced to a heartbreaking scene, where Joel makes it abundantly clear that she's not his daughter, right after Ellie pours her heart out to him, stating he's all she's got. Joel sees how much he has hurt her shortly after, and decides to try and make this work. He realises how much she means to him after Ellie is kidnapped by a cannibalistic group, and he must save her. Later on, Ellie becomes quiet and distant somewhat. She realises what's coming. Joel, at this point, hasn't quite made the connection that the cordyceps virus grows all over the brain, and the only way to extract it from Ellie would certainly cause her death. When the pair finally make it to the Fireflies, Joel learns quickly of her fate. He's not about to lose another daughter. Fighting his way through the armed guards, he rescues Ellie and brings her back to Tommy's. It's during this trip back that he makes a controversial decision. He lies to Ellie about her condition, telling her that there is no cure. This decision alone is quite relatable to players, especially parents, but also may have tarnished his likability factor. He chose his own needs over the needs of others. This has had players on the fence about the character. All three have one strong trait in common, a loyalty to others. Whether it be Deacon with Boozer, Arthur with the gang, or Joel with Ellie. All have suffered heartbreak, whether it be the events before their respective games or during. The resilience in each character is strong. Even after enduring all what they have, they still persevered. Some of the differences in the three are how they deal with the tragedies. Where Deacon chose to stay positive after the loss of his wife, when Arthur lost his son, he attached to the gang, and when Joel lost his daughter, he became cold-hearted and distant. Grief affects people in different ways. So let me know in the comment section which one of these are your favourite and why, or was it someone different entirely? I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. You've been listening to Phil of Philby Gaming. If you wish to get in touch, you can do so by finding me over on my Instagram page, which you'll find both on screen and linked below in the video description. If you enjoyed what you saw today, remember to hit that like button, and if you aren't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. If the video does well enough, I'll produce a second one discussing and comparing 3 female protagonists. Thank you all for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.